Hello, my name is Kelsey. I am currently an occupational therapist student intern. I am completing my level 2 fieldwork, and in doing so, I have discovered a great need for just different attention tasks that students can use in the classroom, as I am in a school-based setting. So today this video is going to dive into the research that I have pretty much put together for the past few months. We're going to discuss the different senses that can be utilized for your advantage in the classroom, what it looks like if there's a problem, particularly with these senses, and then different methods that you can try to incorporate into your classroom. The big point to keep in mind is that everybody's sensory system is different. It kind of runs your personality. So one day you may particularly need a large cup of coffee to get going, whereas another day you may not need as much caffeine. So this is very similar to your students, whether in whatever way you're working with them, whatever capacity, utilizing these strategies hopefully will be able to get them to listen. So I'm going to start basically all back to where sensory integration, the whole frame of reference, got started. This is with Jane Ayers. She is a very well-known researcher who pretty much defined 5 key senses that we should look at for students and any children who are having difficulties that of course, like I said, we'll be able to discuss later on. So for that case, the 5 key senses that we're going to talk about are tactile, proprioceptive, vestibular, auditory, and visual. Sorry if I keep looking down. I want to make sure I hit every point. So people or children, whichever, with poor sensory integration are often children with autism. A lot of the research that I found were either studying students with autism or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. So autism, 3 main ideas would be, obviously the social component. Often writing can be affected by not having your senses integrated, and also attention. ADHD is pretty much exactly the same, social, attention, and also the organization. To say that one can't be seen in the other, not true, obviously. If there's an issue with your sensory integration, you can have all these problems, but this is what research has kind of led me to believe, that these 3 areas are seen in these categories. There's also sensory processing disorders. These are more prevalent in children with autism and as common as ADHD, yet it receives far less attention, partly because it's never really distinguished as a distinct disease. So it has similar symptoms as we will see, such as hyperactivity to sound, covering your ears. You may also have this to sight or touches. Certain children may not want to be touched, a light touch especially. We'll discuss that later. Poor fine motor skills, and important to this discussion, high distractibility. So, like I said, sensory integration, we do this daily. The drinking coffee is a huge example. You may also listen to soothing music. I often need that, after a hard day. Or maybe even jogging to release tension. But we don't recognize, or may not recognize, that a lot of what we do may unconsciously help regulate our system. And these children are not realizing that they need these tactics, or they don't know how to do it, or their sensory is so off that they can't even know where to begin. So, get started. The first sense that we're going to discuss is tactile. So this is our sense of touch. This is pretty much as we know. If it's not integrated, an individual may have trouble in crowds, pull away from hugs, or maybe they have to touch everything, or they may be bothered by certain clothes or foods is a big one. So these are just little things that you may be able to see. So there, for each of these senses I forgot to mention, they may be defensive or they may be seeking. So for defensive, this is going to be someone who pulls away from that particular experience. So like I said, maybe pulling away from the shirt or a food aversion. Seeking is someone who needs it. So maybe they're constantly rubbing, right? They need that feeling into their hands because they're just so thrown off. So what you can do, if you so please, are sensory bins. Sensory bins are huge for both categories. So these are all over Pinterest. Pinterest is my best friend. The key is that if it's someone defensive, often you want to start dry and go to wet. So dry materials, in the beginning, maybe something like uncooked pasta. And then you'll move to the rice because that has a little more materials to it. Then you go to something like a wet pasta. And there's also different things online that you could find. I bought this wet snow for, as it's winter, I bought it for the kids a few weeks back. It's probably like $6 online. And when you made it, it felt wet and it had very tiny particles. It's hitting a lot of the nerves in your hand when you have your hands in it. Going through this process can help a child who is defensive sort of slowly understand what's happening to them, because if they go straight into that wet snow that I talked about, they may become so thrown off that they're not gonna even want to try anything else you give them. So that trust, you need to be able to start with something dry and show them that that's okay and work into it. So like I said, these can be used for holiday seasons. You also may use this as an award for someone who is seeking that. So, hey, Johnny, go do your work for 5 minutes, and then you can have, a minute or two in the sensory bucket. So just something that may be helpful. Also important to keep in mind for tactile is that you can have rough or smooth textures. I think kind of common logic, but you may not recognize it, right? So the feeling of sandpaper can hurt you, may be good for someone that's seeking, versus the feeling of a soft blanket may be good for calming. To show you something that I came up with, kind of a cheap alternative, just a method to have. This is, so you can see, these are examples from Home Depot for free. I took them different carpet squares. So this one's a little softer. This is like a grass, so that's a little tougher. And then this is somewhere in between. And these are like hardwood floors, so this has a little, it's more flat texture. This has some grain in it, and then this has even more grain in it. So kind of an idea that maybe they can go have this nearby and feel it as needed. Okay, next sense, proprioception. This is going to be your sense of body and space, so your joints, your limbs. This is often helped by tactile, and then what we'll discuss later, the vestibular senses. And if it's not integrated, a child may have poor motor planning, so clumsiness. They may walk on their toes, you'll notice. So even if it's not fully, you can't it's not exaggerated, you'll notice that they're almost landing on their toes last. They also may have persistent chewing because they're seeking some deep pressure. and or messy eating. They don't really know where the body is, so how are they going to figure out how to feed themselves? So in this category, we have deep pressure versus light touch. So deep pressure, as we know, is like a massage, right? That's something that's going to make you extremely calm, very helpful for all different diagnoses. Temple Grandin, I hope I'm not pronouncing that wrong, is a wonderful researcher. She has great books out there if you're interested in this topic. She actually has autism, and she gave this, I thought, a great comparison. She said in animals, the tickle of a fly landing on a skin may cause a cow to kick because it's so sudden, right? But the firm touch of a farmer's hand quiets her. So we're very similar. Now, if you come up to someone and lightly tap them on the back, they may go, like it's very scary, very sudden. So in that regard, alerting, right? So if you have a child that you're losing, right, they're kind of dozing off in class, maybe coming up behind them, light touch to the back, hey, how you doing? That may bring them back. Versus if they're all up and out, you may need to provide some deeper pressure. Beyond the, massage that we talked about, weighted materials are all over research. They help with on-task behavior, attention, speed of processing, and responding. So being in a conversation and those out-of-seat negative fidgety behaviors. So an example would be, I created this weighted lap pad. So I'll pull it out quickly. Basically, this is a cheap old pillowcase that I put it in so that it can be cleaned in between. It's found it on Pinterest as an idea. It is duct tape, and then on the inside, each bag is about 2 pounds of rice. So altogether 8 pounds. There isn't a lot out there about the recommended weight. They tend to say somewhere between 5 to 10% of the child's body weight. So 8 pounds could be like, 8% of 80 pounds of child's body weight. Just a guesstimate, as I'm more in a middle school, elementary school setting, this is where I thought was going to be appropriate amount of weight. So, simple idea. There's also the concept of deep muscle relaxation, which I have found for myself can be very helpful. There are a ton of videos out there on YouTube that will discuss, basically will lead you through the process of, tone up here, right? Tone your arms, or feel the pressure, and then it will go through your whole body. So you're really getting an understanding of where your body is, what it feels like when you're tight, what it feels like when you let loose. So limitations to a lot of these studies that I found is that there are a lot of small sample sizes. They only get, 3 kids on the autism spectrum disorder. They have, and then that along with other basics, they kind of have these decreased level of evidence. Therefore, usually, like the current critically appraised topics, and a lot of systematic reviews will say, use caution when implementing. No kidding, right? And it kind of calls for more activity. So like I said, the amount of weight not clearly defined. Also, length of time is not clearly defined. They'll kind of say 30 to 60 minutes during an activity is your best bet. And then taking it off and leaving at least an hour in between the sessions. This is important so that it doesn't just become another part of them. If they're constantly in that lab pad, and this is for all the different senses, if they constantly are getting the input, it may actually just become another regular activity to them, and they won't be able to respond to it as well. One researcher suggested time periods could be that you do this, could be like the start of the day, right when they come in, throw the lap pad on. It also could be after recess, which, they could be all excited, stimulated during different sitting activities throughout the day, or stressful activities are also really good. The other idea is just heavy work in general, making them, run an errand for you, carry books around, move these books over here for me. That's really helping them feel a sense of pressure that is good for them. The pressure of meaning deep pressure. So another suggestion I throw out there, I was really lucky to go to a mattress factory and ask for scraps, and they told me that they would help me and make a crash pad. That is another huge concept. You'll notice children may often want to throw themselves on the ground. They may hit their heads. That's a huge thing I've seen, seeking this pressure. Instead, they can throw their bodies into this crash pad. It doesn't have to be huge, right? It's as long as maybe you throw a mat out and then this crash pad on top, and they can throw the top of their body on and then the bottom of their body, right? It doesn't even have to get their whole body at once. It's just a really good method. Okay, next sense, visual. We all know this, right? Our seeing. Important to keep in mind, having that control of your eyes helps with literally everything, right? Your posture and limb movement. And really like visual gaze, different perceptions, lots of this go into the whole understanding of your senses and being able to attend in class. So if they're not integrated, you may have negative impacts on the visual information that can come in. They may just shut out after a while. And therefore, like social, emotional, motor control, and cognitive control are all going to be affected naturally. So those who are seeking, that we talked about, may focus on pieces of dust and particles that you couldn't see at all. They may dislike the dark or bright lights. They may dislike sharp flashes of light. And they may look down most of the time or cover their eyes or close them at bright lights. Those that are on the opposite end of the spectrum may be really attracted to light. They may look at it intensely, at objects or people. They may move fingers in front of their eyes. We'll see a lot of this to try to get some more stimulation. And really like looking for bright lights, bright colors. So research has shown that the individuals with ADHD and autism and sensory processing disorders, that combo, have extremely decreased visual perception skills, which to me means it's indicative of some sort of sensory component to that visual perception, right? So lighting. There's actually a couple companies that have researched the effects of lighting and found that fluorescent lights are terrible. Although they are often used in schools, they lead to stress, anxiety, hyperactivity, attention problems, and lots of other poor learning performance atmospheres. Even repetitive behaviors can be linked back to this fluorescent lighting. So by using simulated sunlight, false spectrum lighting, even one study saw halogen lighting would help this attention, would help decrease stress and anxiety. So to stimulate, right, those bright lights, flashing lights, bright colors. So maybe you put up like some old Christmas lights, right? You go out after Christmas, find them, or lay them around, the desk, something that's a little extra bright to them. Calm would be the low lighting. Even to the extent of, maybe it's bright outside, so you turn off your classroom lights and you want all your kids to come, they come back from recess, they're all hypered up. You turn off your lights, leave the blinds open, and if you need, honestly, have a flashlight for closer work. This is going to help them really calm down. So another key component for the visual sense is that whole organization. Messy desk can really throw off a kid's day. They do it to themselves, but they need that extra help to tell them, put away all this except that paper. Decreasing all those materials on your desk will really help them attend. So I found another wonderful scent, Pinterest find. It's kind of baby oil, water, some glitter, and some food coloring. Kind of is a calming method that can help children focus. So maybe you give them this for 30 minutes, 30 seconds to a minute. They get to move around with it, which can add the other sense of that tactile input that maybe they want to feel different parts of it. And then they can also see the glitter going through it, which you can't see right here, but I promise it's there. There also there are different methods online. On Amazon, I found these systems that they call them projectors. Simple. So one's like a Flexion Ocean Wave for like $12. Another one's low home projector, night light. What these guys do is they send out different lights. So they may often be used, night light, so to help the child calm to go to sleep. But if a child is way up here, that light is not going to put them straight to sleep. It's going to bring them down and help them regulate at that baseline. It also has an auditory component, which is going to be our next sense that we go into, that hearing sense, right? So it has calming music to help them. So for auditory, as we run into that, that helps with localizing a sound, where it's coming from in the room. Having this sense, you're able to help with the understanding of language because it helps you understand pattern recognition, right? The order of how letters sound. There's also that aspect of being able to hear while there are competing sounds outside. So being able to filter out other info. When students don't have this integrated, they may become avoidant, unlikely to process verbal instructions, end up with worse grades. Often they cover their ears to try to stop all the stimulation. So they discussed that people with autism may have cognitive abilities similar to those of non-autistic or gifted people, but their interpersonal and sensory modulation difficulties, specifically this auditory sensitivity, actually really negatively affects their performance, right? Because they're constantly trying to regulate themselves and it's taking them off the task that they should be on. So another cool aspect that I found was a study by Block, drawing a blank on her first name, but she runs through different sound-based interventions, which these are kind of the incorporation of noise and music to alter behavior. They've been found beneficial for ADHD, autism, developmental disorders, head injury, multiple sensory system disorders, and learning disabilities. So she really went into these different aspects of understanding that by providing this different opportunity of auditory senses, they can really help calm a child and help them attend. She also ran into the aspect of ear dominance. So if we are often right ear dominant, which means we hear information and, as I'm sure you know, it processes in our other, I'm backwards, but it processes in our left hemisphere. That's where our language is. Now, she found that out of 100 students with ADHD, 100% had a left dominant ear, which meant it was getting processed in their right brain and then had to cross that corpus callosum to be able to process in their left. So ultimately giving them that one extra step to really understanding what you're saying, which I thought was important to keep in mind. Her research has shown that by helping them become more right ear dominant, this is going to help them process the information. Something as silly, now she has this whole program that you run through, but something as silly as talking to their right ear instead may not be huge, but it may help slowly them get that cross instead of going back and forth. So there's also like therapeutic listening, which is recommended, 2 times a day, 30 minutes each. When they use it for 3 to 6 months, they use high quality headphones and listen to music and really help them with attention to task, spatial organization, and a ton of OT methods, and have been proven to increase their scores with this. So other methods in the classroom, maybe throwing down a rug or a carpet to decrease the echoes, covering loudspeakers to try to help that, stop that. When it's too loud, it may throw them off every time. Keeping some calming music on in the background, warning about the bells, announcements, even if there's a way for you to figure out fire drills before they happen, so they get that knowing in advance. Also using a really soothing, soft, quiet voice. Yelling at them doesn't usually work. As with most kids, yelling can make them very anxious. When they are really extreme or hypersensitive to auditory, it's that more extreme. It's really going to shut them down. They're going to become hopeless, and you lost them. And also the well-known headphones, even earmuffs, may help those who have too much hypersensitivity. There are a ton of other things, such as the interactive metronome. You hit a trigger on a certain heartbeat. I found with my work, adding that metronome, I got an app for free. Having that soft beat in the background of going back and forth really helped my kid with ADHD stay on task, so maybe it could help you as well. So some of these things may have small but positive effects, right? It doesn't hurt to try. So our last sense, vestibular, this is going to be what detects our changing gravity. Kind of helps me stay upright, helps me know where my head is in space. So when I'm turning, when I'm shifting weight, accelerating, decelerating, this is all coming from our vestibular system, and keeping that proper alignment will really come from that. So if it's not integrated, straight off the bat, difficulty with attention. There's also coordination difficulties, following instructions, reading, hand-eye coordination. All of that is really going to be negatively impacted. Due to children not moving as much as they frequently have, this system particularly is really taking a beating, for lack of a better word. There's often gravitational insecurity, which is that fear of almost falling. So it's often worse in children's sensory processing disorders, autism, and even anxiety and mood disorders are connected to this. It's so significant. So stability balls are one method that people have used to help increase that attention. Maybe you start with a smaller, a smaller ball almost on the ground. This is really going to help them feel more secure, and then you build it up, not until their feet are off the ground. That's something maybe the OT will work even more on, but just so that they're almost at a 90 hip flexion, right, 90 knee flexion, and then they're able to be more alert and at their desk instead of launched over, and you lost them in that sense. So slow movements are the ones are perfect for those guys that need calming. Maybe you throw a rocking chair in your room if you can. Get a minute on there. Faster movements are the ones that need to be alerting. So that's spinning. Maybe you have a spot on the floor, in your corner. Here's your spin mat. Go, Now here's the thing. They shouldn't just spin. They need to spin, in almost a controlled fashion, 10 times one way, take a second, spin 10 times the other way. This is helping your brain regulate, really the whole idea of spinning, getting that integration. Jumping, how you do 10 jumps. Really, all of these are going to be good and helpful in your classroom. You can't always, have a swing in the middle of your classroom. So finding ways, maybe they need to roll a couple times to get that same input. or even if you could, a scooter could also be helpful. So I'm running out of time, but our last thing is all of this together, right? Our sensory diets are slowly being more discussed. Really, this is going to be the accumulation of all these strategies geared towards a particular child's day, and how their sensory system is reacting that day, right? Because maybe one day, Bob may be really good with getting 10 jumps in the morning, and then the next day you come in and you try those 10 jumps and it does absolutely nothing for him. So keeping all these strategies in mind is really helpful. And really it's going to, by giving them this diet, it's going to help with self-stimulatory, even self-abusive behaviors have been found to decrease with this approach. They find the best method is a multisensory approach. So this is stimulating at least 2 senses at one time. So simultaneously doing this for a period of maybe, they say at least 90 minutes per week. So this helps improve improves the speed at which results occur, actually. So not only is it helping the result of intention, but it's also helping that child attend even quicker as time goes on. So programs that I found just online, there are 2 in particular, actually both engage vestibular, visual, and auditory simultaneously. One is called SAVE. It's a sensory motor auditory visual education. This was by Block, the researcher I discussed earlier. She has them lay on a moving reclining chair and listen to the specialized music through headphones while seeing color lights on the screen. Now, obviously, this is going to be performed in a much more unique setting. I just wanted to throw it out there as this is a concept that a lot of more research now has been drawn from. So a more practical idea is astronaut training, which is going to be when the child sits on this board and they engage in this visual activity while music plays. A little more simpler. So kind of helps. So practically maybe the same senses in the classroom can be stimulated. They bounce on a ball, they listen to music through headphones, and they search for brightly colored dots that you place throughout your room. Really helping them stay alert, focused, and on task. So, they do that for a minute, come back to you, and that's part of their sensory diet, right? So maybe they, throughout the day, will have, 5 breaks and at a minute or 2 each, and depending on the child, right? So maybe one child needs 5-minute breaks 5 times. This, of course, can be run by your occupational therapist as what's best for the child. So really, to come back, bring it all together, Autism Speaks wrote this quote I really liked. It says, "There's much that can be done to help alter the environment and provide supports that will make the world a less overwhelming place." I'm sure you've seen, if you're watching this, I'm sure you're interested, children with autism and, like I said, ADHD, sensory processing, and even others can be so thrown off, right? As they say, overwhelmed by the environment. They may be doing this, right? They may not be getting the right senses. They're doing this. So helping them alter this environment, providing sensory integration tactics are really the method that we're finding is going to be most beneficial for them to do better academically. So I am going to try to attach a list that I've made from kind of other sources. I don't think you can really see it, but basically it goes by each sense that I've discussed today, and will tell you common learning strategies. Some of them you'll find are on both, because depending on the child, like I said, for example, chair dips or wall push-ups may be calming for one child seeking that proprioceptive, while another child needs it to be alert. So these are all, some of it's I mentioned, some of it are different ideas. I can't hit every point. I'd be on here forever and you'd want me, you'd stop listening. So if you haven't already. So these are all really just tactics I hope you can draw from to see improvements in your child. I hope that this wasn't all redundant for you and you've learned something new today. Thank you for listening. Bye.